Hey guys, so I'm just going to continue exactly where I left off and going to talk to you about Tailwind. So, as many of you know that Tailwind provides utility classes for a lot of CSS stuff, and it's just, I would say, one of the best ways to get started with CSS. And because you don't have to remember all of the properties, it's really easy and you can create pages really fast. So let me just go back here. Let me just delete this and just basically delete the whole CSS thing. Let me just delete the whole file. I have the same content, and now let's just go ahead and download Tailwind, or probably even just grab a Tailwind CDN, which basically means just a link to the Tailwind CSS. So I'm here, and I think the Tailwind CDN should be at the bottom somewhere. Yeah, here it is. So there are a bit of limitations if you use the Tailwind CDN. You obviously can't configure or customize some of the default themes, and here are some of the things that you can do. But it would probably be fine just to show you how it works. And I think it's probably okay or perfectly fine for you to use Tailwind CSS without necessarily configuring it. So one thing right off the bat that you can see is Tailwind actually removes all the base styles from different components. So for example, from the links, from the buttons, everything is removed. So now, if we go ahead and try to recreate the layout that we already had there, it's really simple. I just go and I add a class to the header. I say it's going to be a flex, which is obviously display flex, and then I'm going to say it's going to have a space between. I just do that, and as you can see, we have obviously the item sitting on the left and the right. Now, one of the problems is that based on what we initially saw, that it is obviously display flex and its space in between, and with CSS that would perfectly work fine. But here we also have to specify I think the width of the element. So let's just see like what the width is. Okay, so the width is, I'm sorry, I think I missed it. It's not space between, so obviously it's justify space between. So we're gonna take the first name, justify, just to justify content, and that's space between. So we're going to pick the justify, and then we're going to say between, and that's just basically going to put the element on the left and put the element on the right, and that's what we wanted to accomplish. And we can obviously give it a BG background. Also one thing, BG, and then gray, and then 100. That's just going to give it a shade of 100. I'm not sure if you guys can see that, so I'm just going to make it slightly more visible. Here you have the header, and we can easily give padding to it. So I can say padding, and all around the padding should be 16. So it uses multiples of 4. So if you want to give like 4 pixel all around, you're going to say P1, 8 pixel all around P2, and then 16 pixel P4. And then you have the left and the right content. Similarly, you go to the navigation, you say flex, and then justify between. And then similarly, BG minus gray minus 300, I'll just give it that, and then P minus 4 here as well. And obviously we can give it slightly more. So I can also say that the padding Y means Y axis, and the padding at the top and the bottom can be PY minus 4, but the padding at the left and the right can be slightly larger. For example, it can be 8, and you can see it gets slightly and from the side. I can also obviously make it 12 to just make it more in. Now, for this image grid, I know we were doing a lot of things, grid, and then the template and all of that, but now I can just basically say grid, and then grid minus calls minus 3. And if I just do that, you can see it just magically works. And I can also give it a text minus center, and it just centers everything. Similarly, on these divs, I can just say I want to give all of them a class, and the class can be BG minus gray minus 300, or It's going to be rounded. It's going to have a particular width. It's already getting the width, but I can say it can have a height of, let's say, 48 or something along those lines. Just save it and see how it looks. I think it looks fine. I'm just going to change the background of it to be slightly subtle, probably 100, just so we can see the slight difference. And if I want to give a spacing between them, I can say gap minus 10, and it's going to give a 40 pixel gap between all of them. Similarly, if I want to give a gap above the elements, above this particular grid, I can say empty minus 10, which is going to give a 40 pixel spacing above it. And that's basically how you create the scene layout really quickly with Tailwind. I can also configure some of the responsive stuff. I can say that by default, since Tailwind is also mobile first, you can say by default it's going to have a single column. On slightly larger screens, it's going to have grid minus call minus calls minus 2. It's going to have 2 columns. And then on an even larger screen, it's going to have grid minus calls minus 3. And there you have it. So obviously, so you have the 3 columns, and then you resize it, you have 2 columns, and then you have a single column. So all of the responsive stuff that you ideally want to do, like most of it, and most of the configuration, not the configuration, most of the structure, and a bunch of the CSS, you can easily handle with Tailwind. You don't have to write it all by yourself. If you want to do something custom, then obviously go ahead and feel free to write it. But this just allows for a lot of flexibility with really minimal amount of work. So that's it, guys. I'll definitely be expanding on this a lot more, and we'll be styling all of these elements and recreating the dribble page a bit more accurately. So stay around and keep on learning.